Blue Shift is known as the weakest expansion to the original Half-Life, and I tend to agree. There were two add-ons made for Half-Life 1, Opposing Force and of course, Blue Shift. And Opposing Force is better in almost every way. Blue Shift isn't a terrible expansion, but it's just more Half-Life, and I'll explain why that's not a good thing today. Blue Shift was initially going to be an exclusive campaign for the cancelled Dreamcast port of the game, but it was eventually repurposed and released on PC in 2001. Unlike Opposing Force, Blue Shift has no new weapons or enemy types and only has 8 levels to go through. It is way shorter than Opposing Force, which is why I'm covering it first, even though it came out later. Instead of playing as Gordon Freeman or Adrian Shepard, Blue Shift centers around Barney Calhoun, a security guard working at the Black Mesa facility.
Nice of you to show up this morning, Calhoun. Yeah, I know. Problems with the access system. Hope you're ready for a long shift.
The opening chapter recycles the tram ride sequence from the original game, and this is one of my fundamental issues with Blue Shift, its lack of a proper identity. Blue Shift is Half-Life 1, but condensed, whereas Opposing Force goes for a very different tone and Adrian's perspective is unique from Gordon's. Barney goes to work for Black Mesa just like Gordon. Barney helps out the fellow scientists and tries to escape the facility, just like Gordon. Even though Gordon was the catalyst for the alien invasion while Barney witnesses it from an elevator, their perspectives are pretty identical. Sure, there are slight variations like Barney putting on his security vest, but again, that's very similar to Gordon grabbing his HEV suit. While I'm not a fan of Blue Shift using the same tram ride idea from the base game, I do appreciate how Black Mesa is expanded upon. In the original Half-Life, I just assumed that Black Mesa was a science facility, and that's it. Blue Shift expands the scope of Black Mesa as it appears to be a self-sufficient complex with living quarters and food courts, and I love seeing this stuff. As you're going through the facility in the opening chapters though, it gets extremely familiar, and I just want Blue Shift to pick up the pace. If you're playing Blue Shift, then you've more than likely played the base campaign and gone through the motions of exploring Black Mesa. At the start of Opposing Force, Adrian's chopper gets blown out of the fucking sky, and it's up to the player to survive. This opening is way different to what we saw in the original game, and it's welcomed because we've already had the slow burn introduction of Black Mesa. In Blue Shift, it feels like you're going through the intro at a snail's pace, just waiting for everything to go to shit. Once you walk inside this elevator and watch as the aliens pick apart the scientists and other security members, Blue Shift starts to get really good. The player starts to go through this facility, killing enemies as they spawn in. However, Blue Shift gets bogged down in these tedious platforming puzzle hybrid sections, and the expansion starts to lose me. Maybe some people love these Half-Life puzzles, but most of the time, I find them as rather annoying pace breakers. Now, getting some downtime in FPS games is common and widely accepted, but the first proper puzzle section in Blue Shift is way too cumbersome for me. There are incredible moments in Blue Shift, like when you see the soldiers dropping dead scientists down a pit, for example. This adds so much to Half-Life's world and gives you a proper look at how bad the military is in this game, but immediately after, there's yet another puzzle that wastes my fucking time. At least when you get about halfway into the expansion, the player starts to fight the military, and this is obviously the highlight of Blue Shift. The military combat areas are solid, and just like in the original Half-Life, they are still as dynamic as ever. So you're gunning down military soldiers, navigating Black Mesa, and the expansion gets pretty good. Then you meet Dr. Rosenberg, and it all turns to shit again.
How did you know my name? Oh, I see. Poor Harold. Yes, our plan was to get to one of the old prototype labs. It involved something that very few people in the facility are authorized to know about. The same technology that brought about this catastrophe could also be our only way out.
You need to get him to follow you in order to complete the chapter, but on my playthrough at least, he gets stuck at a certain point and runs in the complete opposite direction. The player needs this guy to come with them, and I had to restart my save probably about 10 times before I figured out how to fix this glitch. Anyway, Dr. Rosenberg and Barney eventually come across an abandoned teleporter, and guess who's the guinea pig that has to go through it? Yeah, so here's the Obligatory Zen Level, and it's actually one of the highlights of the expansion. The goal of this chapter is to activate some device to make the teleporter fully operational so you and the scientists can get the fuck away from Black Mesa. Chapter 5 is very focused and cuts out all of the fluff that the base campaign Zen levels had. Zen and Blue Shift has platforming elements as well as light puzzles, but they don't bog down the experience and the chapter is still pretty action-packed. You also aren't chasing down a fat Zen monster or spending too much time killing those annoying alien grunts. Once Barney leaves Zen, he is asked to turn the power back on and recharge these batteries or something. Honestly, Blue Shift's storyline and level progression is paper thin, and half the time I'm not even sure why I should care. I like Barney as the protagonist, and I'm glad we get to see a happy ending in Blue Shift with him and the scientists escaping from the military, but a lot of this expansion is a wash. While I think comparing it to Opposing Force is pretty unfair considering that it wasn't even supposed to be an official PC expansion, they still released it. This is one out of the 2 expansion packs for Half-Life, and I feel like it's somewhat justified to criticize it all the same. I'm not even going to complain that it doesn't have any new weapons or new enemies, but the level design doesn't seem that refined, and this is literally Half-Life Light Edition. Barney goes to work, puts on his suit, an alien invasion breaks out, he tries to escape the facility, he winds up in Zen for some fucking reason, etc. I get that there are differences between Barney and Gordon, but I feel like more could have been done to make Blue Shift's story more unique. They could have made it so that Barney's tram ride is interrupted by the aliens, and then he needs to go through the living quarters of Black Mesa instead of the actual science complex in the beginning. That would have been more interesting, and we would have seen a brand new side of Black Mesa. Half-Life 1 and its surrounding expansions is all about perspective, and I would have loved to see more unique narrative elements from Blue Shift. I mean, one of the main selling points of the original game was how the story was unbroken and Gordon Freeman's perspective is the same as the players. You are Gordon Freeman, at least in the base campaign, and the thought of these Half-Life expansions putting the player in some unrelated character's shoes is exciting, but only if they are completely different from Gordon. I think this is where Blue Shift dropped the ball. That being said, I cannot wait to discuss Half-Life Opposing Force, because that is such a well-crafted expansion. I would recommend playing Blue Shift just once, but I don't really see any point in replaying it if you have already. Blue Shift had the potential of being fantastic, it really did, but it misses the mark for me. However, before we move on to Half-Life 2, we will talk about your favorite Half-Life expansion next time.